Thank you, folks, and thank you, Mr. Stein, for getting us started this evening. Well, board members, we have been presenting in public, and the setup for the public hearing information really has been shared abundantly in the community and has been on our website for a number of weeks. And so we would like to ensure that all of that is clear and in the record from the podcast that is happening as we do this public hearing this evening. And so we'll cover those slides again rather quickly. This information has been in play and again is a matter of public record on the website. So actually Mr. Quackenbush is one of these great consultants who really work all around the region, in many states, some of them. And in fact, we found out during one of our meetings that they all live in Zionsville. And they choose to live here, and it was interesting that all of our key consultants, architects, the financial experts, the legal experts, and so on, have residence here. And we thought that was pretty interesting and important, powerful fact. This is the new Indiana way, that we have to do referenda for things. We've become a referendum state, and you see that many of our neighbors, at least with regard to operating referenda, and many of them with construction referenda as well, are doing this. In fact, there are 46 current operating referenda in force in Indiana with an average of 26.88 cents. You recall that our operating referenda has never exceeded 24.44 cents, and if we move forward and if you approve the ballot questions for November, we would seek to renew our current operating referendum. But tonight we're really here to talk in this hearing about the construction portion. You'll recall that we are the lowest funded school district in the state of Indiana. That continues. And we also have been lucky enough to have, not really lucky, actually a lot of hard work by our financial experts and our in-the-house crew in the business department. We have the highest credit rating, tied with Carmel. Actually, there are only two of us in the state of Indiana with a AA credit rating. Interestingly, the two lowest funded school districts have the highest credit rating. We're proud of that, and we think it's external validation of the efforts that have been put forward in financial stewardship here. With 15 years with no new construction debt in Zionsville Community Schools. During that time, we've added 3,000 new students. We've reduced the school tax rate by 20% through the refunding that happened in 2014, obviously benefiting all types of taxpayers. And that smart debt management immediately saved us $13.1 million. And we have, unlike most folks who've had an audit this year in the Indiana school business, there have been nearly 200 audits at this point. There have been 5 others in ZCS with completely pristine audits. So it's obviously something that we chase after and work hard to ensure that we're good financial stewards. There's that number, 24.44 cents. We never reached it. We never changed it. We would not bring to you an amount higher than that for the coming consideration that you'll see. Well, an operating referendum really here has equaled teachers and counselors. In fact, at present, 1/3 of our teaching staff, counseling staff, is funded by a referendum. If not for that referendum, they would not be employed here, and obviously that would impact class sizes greatly. So it's something that is very important to us. We have promised in 2 successful referendum cycles, in the renewal of the one from 2012 and 2015, and we hope in our renewal of the 2015 and 2018 to protect class sizes and property values, and we've proven that we've done both of these. Well, we know that whole community redistricting is sometimes necessary with rapidly growing districts like ours. We seek to avoid that as often as possible because disruption of student continuity in their classes and at their home schools is something that's difficult for them and for families. We've been 17 years without the entire district redrawing the boundary lines, and we'd like to go 20 years, and our plan, in fact, would make it possible for us to redistrict just once in 2022. And if we are unsuccessful in any way, then we would have to redistrict more times. Our proposal allows this to occur through our demographic projections, our facility study, and our financial analyses. Becky and Mike will be talking more about those in just a minute. But cutting to the chase, we believe that building a 6th elementary school by 2022 would allow us to redraw boundaries just once in that year, as I mentioned. These are the locations of our 8 campuses, plus the one that is noticed as number 6 there with a question mark. That would be elementary number 6, and we are, as Becky will show you, going to promote to you and propose to you that you look at the County Road 875 campus as the most logical place for that. and we'll tell you why in a bit. A high school addition and reconfiguration is also necessary by 2023, and so let me talk about enrollment growth because Becky is going to share with you more about that prior slide, the reconfiguration that is needed at the high school. My job this evening is to talk about the enrollment growth for a bit, coming from the Kelley School of Business demographic study that has been renewed frequently across the last several years. You know, board members, that we are Union and Eagle Townships. Those are our legal boundaries for the Zionsville Community Schools, obviously all of the town of Zionsville and the Eagle Township portion of Whitestown. Here we are, our 8 schools, and the 9th over there on the right, if it should manifest in that way, as we hope it does. This is one of the slides from the Kelley School of Business. You'll see that the blue line that has been depicting our enrollment growth goes green and keeps going northward because we are going to grow for the next decade at about 205 students per year. We know that this is reliable information because the IVRC has been doing our demographic studies for 20 years. You see that in the blue decade there on the left and the red decade, they have been spot on, even though the red decade during financial decline, the recession and so on, it was very difficult to make that call, but they were still within some years 3 or 4 or 5 students out of 6,000 or 6,500. So it's just amazing how accurate they've been. So we believe them when they say that we're going to grow by 200 students per year for the next 10 years. This is from their projection last year-over-year cycle at 211 new students. And I wanted to pause for a moment to remind you about our class size targets because that is really important to our overall story. The class size targets really, as we know, have driven positive instruction because our teachers can actually find their students. We know from the lost referendum in 2010 that class sizes skyrocketed and it was very difficult for our teachers and for our students until luckily we passed that 2012 referendum and got to again honor the class size targets. We do this in bands, K1 at 18 plus or minus 5 students, grades 2 and 3 at 20 plus or minus 5, and 4 through 12 at 25 students plus or minus 5. We have adhered to those in the years following the referendum by using those resources. And this is a quick look. And again, I'm showing you a lot of numbers. It will be on the website, just like the other version when we get in the public forums. These presentations, you'll see that you don't see a lot of 30s there, as we did in 2010, 11, and we have adhered to those class size targets, and the community has indicated that they've appreciated it. That was in grades K through 4, and our core academic subjects in 5 through 8. Here we are again with numbers that are very respectable and within those ranges. Similarly, at the high school level in the core academic courses, we continue to have numbers that are very workable for our class size targets. So that doesn't happen without the resources that are provided by the referendum. This graph is simply to indicate that we are a big portion of the population growth that we've seen. And we're 70% of it for Boone County's population so far this decade. This is one of the charts from the full study by the Indiana Business Resources Center by the Kelley School of Business. And although you can't really stop and see all of those numbers, cut to the chase. From 7,000 now, 200 per year, to 9,000 by 2027, 28. We are growing rapidly and will continue to do so. Well, this slide just shows the lines that depict each school's growth. You'll see that the BME, that's Boone Meadow Elementary, and UE, they're together at the top, going northward very quickly since 2013. Those are rapid, or I should say, our fastest growing elementary areas, and the ones that will reach 100% capacity very soon. Interestingly, on the west and the northeast, directly opposite from one another in geographic position, but we're growing and it will not abate. At the middle school level, we do have sufficient capacity really for many years to come, and so we know that that's a good place for us to be and will help us reduce in the costs that it will take for us to accommodate growth as we move forward during the next decade. With the high school, we see that they're calling for, at the low projection, a 30.4% increase or almost a 36% increase over the next decade. Well, that demographic study is a research basis for projecting our enrollment, but the folks who do that, again, very reliable, 200 plus each year for the next decade. We know that there are folks in the community who believe that our schools are responsible for the growth. In fact, our school board, as you know, folks, you do not have the opportunity to weigh in on land use questions. That is not something that is within your purview. We do not vote on housing or growth. It is merely our opportunity and really good fortune to get to serve the youth who come to our community. So it really is our chore to do the things that we're doing with deep planning and making sure that we are prepared when our students come to us. Well, with that said, we're going to move on now to facilities, and our expert is Becky Kaufman.
Thank you, Dr. Robison. This evening, we want to share a little bit about the investments that our community has made in the 8 campuses, as Scott was referring to, and also talk a bit about how do our present capacities at these facilities align with the demographic projections that we know have been shared with us by the IU Kelley School of Business. Presently, with our 8 campuses, we have just over 1.6 million square feet. You can see indicated on this slide, as well as the following slide, the age in which each of those facilities was brought online in our community. So with the exception of the high school, which was originally built in 1968 in Eagle Elementary, Pleasant View Elementary first opened in 1982, and we had an addition later in 98. But since 1998, we've brought online all other buildings across our corporation to serve schools. And as we would consider those 8 facilities, we need to keep in mind, how do we maintain and care for those spaces so they can be optimal learning environments for our students and our teachers. So we had engaged in a months-long process with Skillman Corporation, our construction management firm, as well as Fanning and Howie and other professionals, to look at every single aspect about a particular schoolhouse. So whether we're talking about mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems, the building envelope with roof, brick, the site conditions with playground, asphalt, athletic surfaces, as well as all of those items that are touched by students each and every day, whether that be the finishes of carpeting, wall covering, so on and so forth. All of those items have a life expectancy, and so we have developed a very extensive, very granular look at every building to know what is our financial risk, much as we would in our own homes and our community, and anticipate when we need a roof replacement. We need to plan for a roof replacement of the high school that exceeds 500,000 square feet and have a plan for that moving forward. So each of our buildings, through the work with our building professionals and looking at those standards, we've made an exceptionally specific plan that will outline in 0 to 5 years, in 10 years, what are those items that need attention before they become emergencies? When do we need to replace certain boilers, chillers, so on and so forth, so that we can have our doors open in a comfortable learning environment before we have an emergency in the middle of winter? And so what you're seeing through these slides tonight are just a glimpse. Board members, you have seen these before in your deliberative information, that each of these particular buildings has a plan for when we would anticipate needing to provide attention to the restrooms, to different areas across each of our school campuses. So again, we've engaged with our industry experts. We've aligned all of that information against work orders to map out and prioritize all of our needs. We have many needs across the school corporation, and so we've identified and planned for inflation on what kind of financial plan do we need to have in place in order to tackle all of those items. And so we want to not just talk about new enrollment and new spaces, but we want to make sure that we're protecting all of our community's investments and making sure that they are in line with what we would expect to see for all students across the corporation. This is a planning board that you've seen in many of our buildings, in many of our meetings, public meetings across time. This takes a look at the enrollment projections and putting that across our capacities. These are our 5 present elementaries, and while you cannot see the number that is listed there, what you can see is the purple shading, which indicates that next year, in fact, we are at 100% or exceeding capacity at Union Elementary, and the year after at Boone Meadow Elementary. What we've done is taken a look at those enrollment projections through the next 10 years, through the 2027-2028 school year, and made a plan for how we will accommodate those spaces. This just gives you a little bit of an idea of Union Elementary. As Dr. Robison mentioned, this is one of our highest growing areas across the district. And as that building has been online for a little over 10 years, we have reached and neared capacity. We've had to do some creative things in order to accommodate the students attending Union Elementary. Some of those items have been reducing our preschool offerings. Many folks maybe are not aware, but we are legally required to provide preschool opportunities to students who are eligible to receive special education services from their 3rd through their 22nd birthday. There are preschool offerings as well that we provide to the community that are for a fee-based structure, and we've had to reduce those opportunities in order to prioritize the offerings for K-4 programming. We've had to modify some of our spaces, and by that I mean we've taken an internal classroom that is a computer lab and have converted that into classroom spaces to be utilized by students. We're in the process of moving our employee clinic out of Pleasant View Elementary's campus to the site that it will be just east of the high school campus. That process will be complete by the end of summer, and that will put back about 8,000 square feet into both Pleasant View Elementary as well as Zionsville West as we move food service and grow offices into the new space. That is instructional space that we can recapture very quickly and also at a financially feasible opportunity rather than adding on. We've also done some pre-redistricting as developments have been approved and come online across Whitestown and Zionsville. So for example, a developer that is coming in, we may look at that plan and we've indicated that your school district and boundary area is Stonegate Z West as opposed to Pleasant View, Zionsville Middle. So we've had some of those conversations with developers as they've come online. We know we need this new space because of where we are with our current capacities, and if we're not able to be successful at the ballot, that will have an impact on our programming that we're able to provide. We know that we would have to take over art classrooms, music classrooms, STEM classrooms, and convert those into 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade classrooms and have some traveling of our curricular offerings. We know that that would require us to look at redistricting multiple times, and as Dr. Robinson said, this plan that we've spent time preparing has redistricting, whole district redistricting happening just once in the fall of 2022 when we would anticipate the 6th elementary coming online. We know that it would result in higher class sizes because if we do not have space to put children, we will only have the opportunity to put more children into each of those spaces. And certainly we would have to continue our conversations with the town and looking at portable classroom opportunities if we're not successful in bringing on a 6th elementary at the ballot box. The board that you're looking at this point anticipates bringing on school number 6. And essentially, as we bring on school number 6, what that would have the end result is bringing all of our capacities at each of the elementaries back down to about an 80% capacity. And so that is something that we feel is very well in line with the practices that have served us well as we've had this growth over the last 20 years across our district. And again, we see the same result in looking at Union Elementary as well, of going back down to about an 80% capacity. As mentioned, we proposed the 6th elementary to be placed just north of the varsity softball fields over on the 875 campus where we have 74 acres for cash rent farming. We have the infrastructure there. We also would propose that we would utilize the Union Elementary footprint. That design has been successful for us. We have replicated that action when opening Zionsville West as being a replication of Zionsville Middle School. Stonegate and Boone Meadow are also pretty much the same footprint. So by utilizing that design on that campus, we know there are some cost savings, and it's a prudent financial decision for us to consider. With redistricting, we know that that will be a very emotional process, as it is in many communities. We would need to have the most recent demographic projection data from IU Kelley School of Business, as well as see what developments are approved by the town of Whitestown and the town of Zionsville before we're really able to engage in that process. So we would anticipate a lot of community input, the modeling that we have available to us, and look at that in the 2021-2022 school year, so that by the time that elementary opens in the fall of 2022, that plan would be put into motion. And again, by placing that elementary school in a central location of all of the properties that we have in our portfolio, we feel that we can displace and move overall the fewest number of families. So this plan that we're talking to you about this evening in this public hearing does have redistricting and those boundary changes just once in 2022. In addition to a new elementary campus, we also know that we have significant needs here at the Zionsville Community High School campus. This is a bird's eye view of our campus, again, originally opened in 1968. We did engage about 10 years ago in a master planning ordinance with the town of Zionsville that contemplated the growth over years and when we would need to bring on additional sections to serve the student population. So considerations for drainage, traffic flow, all of that was put into play as the town had engaged in this process with us to look at future additions here on the high school campus. We have already modified classrooms here. We've taken away those computer labs. We've done some very creative things with our scheduling so that students are not forced into their curricular programming, that we are looking at a student's preferred course plan, whether that be for Algebra 2, French, and a performing arts course. We're wanting to make sure students get the courses that they are interested in and not we're trying to make sure our schedule can accommodate all of that. We also know we have some challenges with split cafeteria service as we serve our 2,000 students in 3 different locations across the high school in the course of a day. And that, again, we do not want lunch to drive the schedule for the high school campus. So there are a lot of common space concerns as we've grown. And so with the high school considerations, we've talked about, if we're not able to add on to our high school campus, we know that we'll have those traveling classes. That will impact significantly the program opportunity. We talked about traveling art and music classes at the elementary. Imagine trying to provide the robotics and other coursework if you were traveling from space to space. We also know that there is some site circulation that needs to be improved on our high school campus at present. There's one main hallway that runs east and west through the high school, and that's something that we significantly have made a focal point in our early planning. Certainly we want to avoid high class sizes. When we were not successful in the past with a referendum question, we did have high class sizes. We had some of our science courses not being able to take place in a lab because we exceeded the number that could safely be present in a chemistry or a physics lab. Those are things that we have included in our planning so the timing is right as those cohorts of students now at the middle school roll up into the high school. And certainly we'd have to look at portable classroom options here as well. This is just a very brief concept draft, if you will, of what we're talking about to accommodate the enrollment growth at Zionsville Community High School. What you see is a new additional east-west corridor that also includes 32 additional classroom spaces, some central cafeteria and other multi-purpose space, as well as recapturing the old cafeteria. So similar to some of the activity that we've done in other construction phases, we would reclaim space similar to when we reclaimed the old gymnasium and converted that into the present day band and choral space, because up until 2015 we still had band that was built in the 1968 classroom. Even though the band had quadrupled in size, we finally have been able to make the appropriate accommodations for space. So that would be a similar approach with this particular series of additions. The other key thing that we're talking about with the high school campus is reorienting the entire campus so that the present front that runs along Mulberry Street would become the back, and the front of the campus would be on the south side. So again, looking at our planning board, we're talking about the need for this really coming online in the 2023 school year as we're thinking about students, as we always do. We're thinking about when those present day 7th graders have really rolled up into their senior year. That is around the time that we need that additional space for the high school campus. So it's simultaneous, if you will. We'd open up that 6th elementary first, and we'd have these series of additions and reconfigurations taking place on the high school campus. And that would bring our current capacity of the high school campus to 2,450 up to just over 3,050 students. So it is essentially a 600 student addition. So our investments on all 8 campuses need ongoing care. With our facility study that we had completed, we've made quite a bit of progress on a number of different items over the last several years with some small bond issues that we have brought into a public hearing. We've done a lot of roof and HVAC work that definitely we were at the time point of those needing to take place. We've also done a lot of upgrades with our phones, with our Wi-Fi, and a number of other aspects. Part of this conversation includes a small reconfiguration at Boone Meadow Elementary. You may recall, board and community, that Boone Meadow Elementary has also served as Zionsville West Middle School before Zionsville West, presently built, had opened. So there are some large music rooms that need reconfigured into a more appropriate 2nd, 3rd, 4th grade classroom so that we can maximize that space. Additionally, if we have 200 new students per year, we will need to add to our bus fleet. And by doing so, we need to accommodate some additional asphalt needs at the transportation center for employee parking as well as the bus fleets. So just some key points to keep in mind, and I'm going to ask Victor Landfair to come to the microphone in a moment. We know that these enrollment and facilities capacities are based on deep study. We need that additional high school space, those 32 classrooms around that 2023-2024 timeframe, and we need that 6th elementary by the fall of 2022. But while we're building new space, we also need to care for our other campuses. Now I'd like to introduce Victor Landfair, who's Vice President of Skillman Corporation, to talk a bit about the preliminary cost estimates of all of this planning that we've had in play.
Thank you, Mrs. Kaufman. Appreciate the board, a chance to participate in this presentation. My responsibilities are simple, but I think important. And one is, how much does this cost and how long is it going to take to build or to do? As you see on the chart above, the projected cost for all of the program that we've been discussing here is a total of $89 million. That is an all-encompassing number, so that includes everything from construction cost to what it costs to deliver, to furnish, and all those things. So these are all encompassed numbers. There are 3 major components of this budget. Number one is the largest is the new elementary school. We projected at $32 million, and again, that includes not only the building, but also the infrastructure it takes to support the building on the current 875 campus. The high school is projected at $35 million. That is both additions to add capacity to the building as well as interior remodeling to convert existing space to other usable academic spaces. As Mrs. Kaufman pointed out, the facility study recommendations, there's over $20 million have been set aside, and this really encompasses needs all across all of your buildings, again, based on what the projected life cycle is and what those specific needs are in those individual buildings, whether it's carpeting or whether it's additional HVAC. The thing that I'll applaud the district for is that you're really taking care of those critical pieces, but they're not necessarily very glamorous like roofs and HVAC, but you certainly know when they don't work. So now we're reaching the point where we can start to take care of some of these cosmetic things that have been tabled strictly just because it's a lot of square footage that you have to take care of with limited dollars on an annual basis. And then finally, a small but very important piece of that is projected about $1.5 million to do the reconfiguration of the Boone Meadow area you just saw to create some capacity in that building for elementary capacity, as well as some improvements at the transportation center. So there are lots of details to these costs, but in summary, those are where the critical dollars, and the largest portions of the dollars will be for this program. In terms of time, we're just getting ready to improve or embark on what we would call the approval phase of the project after these two hearings. You know, to have a chance to consider that, and then a projected referendum date in November. When that is successful, we will immediately start into a design phase, and that phase will be ongoing as we embark on multiple components at one time. You'll see that we've shown the facility study recommendations. That construction starting the spring, summer of 2020, and really continuing on through 3 summers. There's a lot of that work really can only occur, or best occurs in the summer, and that's why you see the way in which it's graphically shown. So that will be done incrementally. We'll want to start the elementary school as soon as we can, late summer, early fall, with the idea of having that building open, furnished, and ready for students for the fall of 2020 occupancy. And then finally, we'll be working concurrently with the high school to get that design completed and starting in the spring of 2021 for the additions. As you can imagine, with the capacity issue, we need to build new first and have the ability to move students into new additions, and then we'll come back and do renovations and repurposing others. So you'll see that we hope to get the additions done by the fall of 2022, and then project that that will continue on into 23 to finish up the remaining areas. It's
Great, thank you.
Any questions from the board? Thank you, Victor.
If I may, then let me address the financial aspects of this. This is an interesting set of facts, and so we will just look at this very quickly. There are 2 counterintuitive notions that we ask you to recall, or at least to keep in mind tonight as we're going through this. Obviously, the conventional wisdom is that when we start looking at a relatively complicated set of projects like this, that you'd expect that this would entail us at this point asking you to help us support an increase in the tax rate. But that is not the case here. We, in fact, are projecting that we will be able to accomplish these projects and see a lower tax rate in the future. We'll talk more about that in just a minute. But there's another counterintuitive idea here as well, and that, unfortunately, is that even with a lower tax rate, some people will see their tax bill go up. To get to the details of this, we'll need to get some technical details, so let me just start off by saying that's because we have some tax rate that's rolling off because of older debt that we will be paying off between now and 2023. But at the same time, we'll also see some addition to the tax rate for the new projects. We will be talking about 2023 as our comparison year throughout this part of the presentation, because 2023 is the year that we project the maximum tax rate would occur under the new projects. We do project that the overall old tax rate would go down by about 25 cents, while a new tax rate of just under 20 cents would come on, giving us a net change in tax rate of almost 5 cents less, 4.79 cents. But to explain that, we have to look back in time a bit. Back before the 2014 bond refinancing, we had a debt service repayment curve, which looks like the one that you're seeing there. The 2014 refinancing, which saved us $13.1 million, reduced that debt service curve by a significant amount and allowed us to do some other things which are important. We did have a no new debt pledge. We were able to address that and preserve that. It's now been approximately 15 years of no new debt. And now, with the projects that we need, we are looking at what is our situation with debt. We're right there in the $119 million range remaining debt. This is after we, at once upon a time in 2005 or so, had total debt in the $265+ million range. What we're talking about here will turn this curve around temporarily, but it does not take us back to the tops of the range that we see there for 2005. It will look a little bit different than that and be more advantageous to us. The actual refinancing that we accomplished in 2014, we saw that we were able to reduce the tax rate by almost 20%, right at 20%, from 2016 to 2014. We actually, at that time, embarked on putting together a 20-year strategic plan for managing our tax rate. Currently, 2019 is actually year 5 of the 20-year plan. Our target for the 20-year plan was $1.30 for the tax rate. I'm pleased to say that in 2019, our actual rate is $1.29.8. So we are right on target in year 5 of the 20-year plan. The 20-year plan, it contemplates going out to the point where we would need to build some more buildings and do some additional financing. As you'll see here from the chart, we have some headroom that we're able to take as an opportunity. As the older debt, as I mentioned a while ago, rolls off, we are able to keep the tax rate level, or actually decline a bit, as we think, while providing us the ability to finance these new projects. In 2012 and 2015, we made 2 important promises to the community, and in return for their support in the referendum. First of all, we said we'd end crowded classes. Dr. Robinson has reported on those numbers earlier for you this evening. We, in fact, did that. The other promise was protecting home values. If you look at the data from 2013, what home values were like right at the time that we were passing the referendum, and look at the latest data available, which is 2018's, we'll see, in fact, that we have fulfilled that promise as well. The housing values in the district, in fact, have increased. So we have data to show that promise has been kept as well. So that's all part of our plan here. Financial stewardship. Dr. Robinson has mentioned several of the other pieces there that we've accomplished. Increasing our credit rating, the saving the $13 million, the lowering the tax rate to 20%, and so forth. They're all really just sort of tools in our toolbox as we tackle our to-do list that we're looking at tonight, which is building the elementary school, building a high school addition, and taking care of our other facilities. So those actions will require 2 separate referenda, one for the capital projects piece of this and one for the operating piece. In November, if it's approved by the board, there will be a renewal of our 2015 operating referendum. We would be asking for authorization to maintain the same maximum cap rate of 24.44 cents that was in the 2015 and 2012 referendum. And then we also would be looking for a referendum for the facilities piece, which by law is required to construct a building of the size that we would need to build, as well as do the projects of that magnitude. So, to accomplish that, we asked our financial consultants to let me recognize Mr. Matt Shoemaker, who's sitting there near the back, from the firm of Stifel. It does excellent work for us. They advised us in the 2014 bond refinancing. Their firm has also provided us with a lot of the data that we're talking about here tonight. Their research called for a phased approach to save us on the interest cost. And of course, they did something to our long-term strategic plan to maintain that tax rate just as we had hoped. So we're proud to be able to say tonight the capital referendum, by their projection, and we think this is right, would add a maximum of 19.69 cents. That would be in the 2002-3 year, which is the year that we see the maximum effect. But that's really 25 cents overall when we look at the debt rolling off. When we look at that assumption, that is assuming a conservative growth of our AV of about 5%. That's actually less than we have been averaging for the last several years. So we think that's a very conservative estimate as well. If there were no AV growth at all, it'd be 25.8, so we'd still have basically a wash on the tax rate. When we look at the comparison of our bonds, as Mr. Landfair just mentioned, we're looking at $89 million. In 2013, our bond issue was around $113 million. The Westfield, or current bond issue, was $90 million. And looking at some others here, we see others also in that magnitude. We see that most of them did, in fact, require a fairly substantial increase in the local tax rate. We, again, are the exception. We believe that we have a net effect of a negative 4.79 cents if we look at the tax rate now compared to the tax rate that we see in 2023, which again is the maximum year effect. 2023 is significant for us because that 19.69 cents is the highest rate we see at any time during the lifetime of the projected bonds. And in fact, after those years, after that year, the years subsequent to that, the rate would actually decrease a bit down to around 15 cents by 2027. It would stay there through the remaining lifetime of bonds. We then come to the question, which is the question that usually is foremost on everyone's mind, is, well, that's all great and all that theoretical stuff is wonderful, but what does that mean to me as a taxpayer? How much money does it mean that my tax bill will go up or go down by? Well, there are some parts of this that we have to make sure that you understand. Within the school district itself, there actually are 5 separate tax rates, depending on which area of the district you live in. The school corporation has only one tax rate that's uniform across the entire school district. So does the county, so does the library. But the towns, which make up the pieces of the school corporation, actually have different rates, 5 different tax rates for the town, depending on whether you're in the urban or rural area or the traditional part of Zionsville or whether you're in Whitestown. All those rates are different. So that will have an impact on what this actual proposed bond issue does in terms of your personal tax bill. We also know that the type of property you have, was 1% property, which is residential. Normally we talk about that as being a homestead, and we get into the law talking about a curtilage, which basically is your house and your garage and the 1 acre of land that all that sits on. 2% property, which is a multifamily, farm, and other types of residential other than the homestead. And 3%, which is all other, particularly commercial and industrial included in that. So the type of property you have, as well as where it's located in the school district, will have an impact on what happens with your personal tax bill. We can generalize and say that the 3% property, and this is wonderful, all 3% property in the school district, we project will have a tax decrease. In some cases, that tax decrease is quite small. It's $3, it's $5, or $10 is a very decrease. Some people see a decrease of $300, $500, and in cases more. For 2% property, the effects are mixed. Again, it will depend on your location, the assessed value of your property. And 1%, pretty much the same. The effect will be mixed based on your location and your individual assessment. We have done some evaluation of the database, which makes up all the assessed properties in the school corporation. And we have found that, generally speaking, we project about 2/3 of all those properties will see a decrease in their tax bill. About 1/3 will see a increase. It does vary, again, by which of the 5 districts you're in. You can see the data there for us. Now, before I get to my last slide, which is the one you're waiting for, of course, let me stop and do the one to make Mr. Falkenbush happy. There are certain pieces of data which are required by law to be disclosed during a public hearing, a 10-way hearing. And while I think we get most of these up to this point, we want to make sure, so I'm going to mechanically go through this list, make sure that we give you a plain English description of each of the data points required by law. So here we go. The maximum principal amount of bonds to be issued in the proposed project is $89 million. The estimated maximum total interest cost for that is $55,798,500. The maximum term of the lease, which we secure in repayment of the bonds, is 22 years. The maximum annual lease payment will be $8,120,000. Maximum aggregate lease payments over the term of the lease will be $144,798,500. The percent of the school corporation's maximum annual debt service to assessed value after the bonds were issued will be 0.88%. The current and overlapping debt to net assessed value ratio is 5.72%. And first-year operating costs, not including the costs for teachers and administrative staff for the elementary school, are estimated to total $589,828. Now, the much long-awaited and promised last slide. The last slide is simply this. We have a calculator that has been built with great help from our good friends at Stiefel. The calculator will allow each individual taxpayer to look at the impact that they will see on their particular house or other property and determine whether their tax bill is going to go up or it's going to go down and by how much. This particular example we are showing here is the median house price for a single-family home in the entire school district, a homestead. That is $353,500, so that is not a random number. That's the actual median. dead center, if you will, statistically, half above and half below that of all the home values. For a home in Zionsville, at the median, we would see an increase projected of $92.55 annually, or $7.71 a month. Now, since I'm not advocating but merely for reporting fact tonight, I'll report as fact as my personal opinion that this is a bargain you should go for. However, that, I believe, brings us to the end of my portion of the presentation, and so I will pass the official clicker back to Dr. Robinson.